Hi, this is Shri, and welcome back to my channel, Vedic Living. So today I'm going to start the new series on the US elections. I asked all of you to vote on who you want me to talk about, and I'm going to start today with the chart of our former president, Donald Trump. So before I go into this, I do want to let you know that when I do political predictions or when I talk about the charts of political candidates, there is no bias here because I'm purely interested in looking at the chart of the person for research purposes. And I just like to look at various, people, events, places, charts, natal charts, just to kind of see what's going on and how the chart is affecting their life, because everything in life happens for a reason. There is an underlying tone of karma when it comes to events that transpire on this planet, and this can be seen in the sky, in the stars, in the heavens. So the pure reason for doing these analysis is just to kind of research and analyze the charts of various people that we know are in the public eye, so we can increase our knowledge of astrology and learn more and more about how the planetary transits in the heaven affects events down here on this planet. So this is completely from a research and educational standpoint, but we will learn a lot through this process as well. So I asked you, and all of you polled, and you let me know your thoughts on whose chart you wanted me to look at. So the very first chart we'll be looking at in this series today is going to be the chart of our former president, Donald Trump. So here's the chart of Donald Trump, and you can see I have his chart up here, and I have the United States chart down here, and I have the dashas. And of course, as you know, I do look at everything from a Gemini standpoint, so I have the Chara dashas here as well. So Donald Trump was born June 14th, 1946 at 10:54 a.m. in Jamaica, New York, USA. And this is the time that we have on Astra Data Bank. So this seems to be an accurate time for him. Everything seems to be kind of matching in his chart, depending on what happened in his life. So I think this is a very, I'm pretty confident about this time, and I'm feeling good about this, this particular ascendant to look at this chart. Because as you know, in order to make accurate predictions, or even in order to understand, or, from a research standpoint, look at a chart, it's very important to have that ascendant. The time of birth is so important. Many of you asked me on the last video how to find the ascendant if you don't know your time. So a lot of times in India, what happens is when you don't know the time of birth, we go by the moon. We say this is where the moon is placed, and we use that as the ascendant. And we look at the chart from the moon because the moon is how you feel. So all the events that happen in your life and how you feel from those events or how you react to them is very much evident from the moon. So that's the reason why when we look at a chart from the moon, it does give you a good understanding, even though it may not be exactly accurate because the moon is in that placement for a whole day, in that nakshatra, in fact, but still it's something that you can go by. But but otherwise, it's very important to have that time of birth. And if you don't know your time of birth, it's good to do a chart rectification and look at the events in your life and kind of ascertain where the ascendant might have been, so that your chart matches all those events that transpired in your life. So that's the way that I would go about it. Now, Donald Trump's chart, you can see that the ascendant is in Leo. And this, a lot of times, we talk about this at length. A lot of astrologers, even back in the 2016 timeframe in those elections, we talked about how his ascendant being in Leo is so important, because Leo is the king. It's a rulership sign. It shows very staunch leadership abilities. And this is the reason why, and I'm talking about this over here when I say ascendant in Leo. He's a leader. He's meant to be in that kind of a position where things are being directed and led by him. People look up to him when he's in that position. He does exude that confidence. And another reason is the ascendant is at the degree. If you notice the degree the ascendant is, it's at the degree, around that degree of the fixed star Regulus. Now, Regulus, the fixed star Regulus, and I'll make another video on all the fixed stars because this is very important. There are certain points in the chart that are very sensitive, and that's an exact degree that's sensitive. So Regulus being in Leo, it's very sensitive because this is the degree of the ruler. It's the king. It's the person. It's basically its symbology is the throne, right? So the fact that his ascendant is at 6 degrees of Leo is very telling, because that's the exact degree of that fixed star Regulus. Now, another thing that's equally important is that if you look at the ruler of Leo, the sun goes to the 10th house. And who is the sun sitting with? It's sitting with Rahu and it's sitting with Uranus. So many important things here. Sun, the ruler of the first house, goes to the 10th house. Automatically, it gets directional strength there. And it's sitting with Rahu so close in degrees. So this another reason that it's so powerful is that it gives the person immense confidence, Sun with Rahu. And it gives him also the ability to speak his mind. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, right? Another thing is that Sun Rahu is sitting in the 10th house of career. So that shows ability to overcome all kinds of issues and problems at work in his career. And also notice, pretty close in degrees is Uranus. What does that show? Sudden, unexpected growth, gains. Things just come out of the blue with this person, right? Even back in the elections in 2016, nobody expected the win to happen, but it just happened. And that's very Uranus-like, right? It's so unexpected, so shocking, it's sudden. And this would not just happen with the elections. It would have been pretty much his career, his whole life, right? Because he would have felt like, something's not working out. Then all of a sudden he comes in, he makes this amazing deal, or he buys a piece of real estate, which ends up being this great success, or it can even be an unexpected loss. But there's always these very extreme ups and downs when it comes to Uranus in the 10th house with Sun and Rahu. It does show that the individual is very outspoken, very determined. Like I said, Sun gives that great leadership ability in the 10th house. That's why he was a businessman. And look at another thing, right? The Sun is sitting in the sign Taurus. Taurus rules businesses. It's the natural businessman. So there you go. That's another reason why he had that success. And not to mention, we have an almost exact trine between Jupiter and this combination of planets here in the 10th house. Jupiter and Uranus are exactly trined, 24 degrees. And mark my words, whenever Jupiter and Uranus come together, if it's together in a chart, like in a house, or if it is trining 5 or 9 placements away, it's always unexpected windfall, unexpected events in a person's life. But Jupiter does rule expansion, and it's in the 2nd house of money and wealth. So it's windfall or gains, money that comes to this person out of the blue. And it does bring a lot. And, I have to tell you one thing, Jupiter, Uranus, and Rahu, these 3 together also, you will see this very prominently, these 3 planets, either transiting or even placed in the chart very prominently of charts of lottery winners. So this is like a very strong kind of position in his chart. This is the reason why he just keeps, rising. No matter what is thrown at him, he's able to defend himself, and he keeps rising. Now, another thing, notice he was born during an eclipse, right? The Sun Rahu together, the Moon Ketu together. So this is an eclipse. And the Sun Rahu being in the 10th house puts the Moon Ketu, that too a debilitated moon, in the 4th house. Remember, Scorpio is, it has like magnetism, right? It's that kind of, you feel like the person, you want to listen to what the person is saying, right? You automatically want to pay attention to them. That's Scorpio, because there's some kind of a magnetism there. Now, this particular kind of placement of the nodes in a chart where all the planets are between the nodes, you see all of them are on one side, this is called a Kala Sarpa Yoga. Now, the Kala Sarpa Yoga in a chart is very important because it makes a person it does make them very successful. But here's the thing, it's an intense and extreme life. Things are like either 100 or it's a 0. There's no middle ground with these people, right? So there are times in life when they hit rock bottom, they are really low. But then if they have the Kala Sarpa Yoga, they rise even higher than before. Like they bounce, right? There's this kind of, they go very low, but then when they do rise, they're in a much better position than when they were earlier. So Kala Sarpa Yoga brings these big swinging extremes in a person's life. They can, with this yoga, you will see, and this is the reason why in Donald Trump's life, you know, one of the main examples you can give for this is he went through bankruptcy, he went through a divorce with, you know, with his first wife, and he had, you know, kids with that first wife too, right? He went through a divorce, he went through bankruptcy. That was a very low point in his life. But then when he rose, he became the president of the United States. So that's that kind of extreme kind of swing that I'm talking about. You go from being very low in life to rising to this extremely high position. And the reason I'm talking about this now is that the situation he's going through now, that we all see in the news, he's always in the news, is also another low. He's going through this low right now, but I think if he's able to survive this, there's going to be another big high, and I'll come to that, come to the predictions for the elections. For now, we're looking at the chart. But yes, this is a Kala Sarpa Yoga. Remember, you know, the big lows in his life will give way to big highs, and we've seen that happen in the past. Now, he does have, if you look from the moon, you can see that the Mercury here in the sign of Gemini, he loves to talk. He's a communicator. Mercury in Gemini, they are the talkers. They like to express themselves. They're constantly talking, very talkative. But this particular Mercury in Gemini goes in the 8th house from the moon. And whenever you have planets in the 8th house, it does show disgrace and humiliation in public. And he's had his fair share of that, right? People attack you. You have all kinds of humiliating events happening in your life. Now, another thing also is, you notice the Saturn, Venus in his 12th house. This can explain the issues in relationships and early relationships that he's faced. Whenever Saturn is very close to Venus in a man's chart, Venus is the indicator of the relationship partner in a man's chart. Whenever Saturn aspects Venus or it's close to Venus, it does bring learnings through your relationship, right? So, and usually it's around the Saturn return time frame that the learnings come across. That's why whenever Saturn is so close to Venus, we tell the client that, you know, it's better to wait till after the Saturn return to get married because of this particular thing. But at the same time, it does bring long relationships because why? Saturn rules longevity. So, you know, even if there may be issues, those relationships do last for a while. It can bring problems though, because it's in the 12th house of endings. Now, one thing I need to tell you is when I look at politicians' charts, they always have planets in the 12th house and very strong planets because the 12th house rules foreign relations, foreign travels, dealing with foreign countries. And this is very important in a politician's chart who's trying to rule a country because you have to constantly be in that position where you're making deals with foreign countries and doing trade relations. And so this is very important to have planets in the 12th house. So this is also very, very evident in his chart. Now, Mars being on the ascendant, you don't sugarcoat things. You speak things as they are, right? You're very direct. And that's also very clear in his chart. Now, you know, when you look at his chart, and I've always tried to explain this in previous videos, whenever a person is trying to run for presidency or they are the president of a country, you will see that they have very strong connections between their chart and the country's chart. Always. There's going to be very strong kind of, you know, degree to degree connections. And that's when you kind of know that this person is going to be very important in the life cycle of this country. Now, regardless of whether they become the president or not, they're going to be very important in the way this country moves. So that's another thing I want to point out here. There are two connections here between Donald Trump's chart and the United States chart. The first thing is, notice his Jupiter. It's at 24 degrees of Virgo right here. And then notice United States Saturn, 24 degrees of Virgo. It's exact, right? That's a big connection right there. This is the reason why he became the president. Why? Because Saturn is in the 10,000 United States chart, and Trump's Jupiter is exactly on it. So always remember to look for this when you look for whether a person is going to have luck in an election or if they're ever going to end up being the ruler of that country. Because and it kind of works in converse too, because when you look at the chart of a country to see what's going to happen in the next year or so, you can always look at the president's chart as well. Because of these connections between the two charts, the president's chart also affects the country's chart. They're mutually dependent on each other almost. They're tied together. So you can see this connection right here in between both the charts. Another big connection that you can see is look at the Mercury. 15 degrees of Gemini, and then look at United States chart Jupiter, 15 degrees of Gemini. So that's another connection, and that's happening in the 7th house of opponents. Remember, in a country chart, in US's chart, the 7th house is opponents, people that other countries that US is interacting with. And his Mercury in Gemini being on that Jupiter makes these interactions easier because he's able to talk and communicate and make deals with these other countries. This is what he was doing when the last time he was the president. So this is a very favorable aspect as well. Having that Mercury sitting on that Jupiter makes him, it's a very favorable aspect in between these two charts. So with that being said, now you know what Trump's chart looks like. And now you know what connects his chart to the United States chart. So very, very clear that there is a big impact happening here. He is very impactful to this country. That's kind of the way you can put it. And when I look at other candidates' charts, you will see these connections. But remember, it does not always mean that they'll end up being the president. We'll look at certain things that will give us a clue whether they will. But at least it tells us when these exact kind of degree connections are happening, that this person is very impactful and very influential in the way this country is moving. Okay, absolutely. There's no doubt, because there's exact degree kind of connections going on here. Now, let's look at his dashas and see what's going on here. He's been in his Jupiter-Mercury dasha since July 16th of 2021. Now, Jupiter-Mercury is 10 placements away. And of course, that does mean communications and social media. And of course, he started a social media platform. Mercury rules that. It's 10 placements away. It's about career, right? He's been really working on his career growth in this time frame. Makes sense, right? Now, Mercury is the second ruler in the 11th. So he has an incredible Dhana Yoga here, which is connecting the houses of the second house of finances and wealth with the 11th house of great gains. And he's been in this Jupiter-Mercury kind of time frame. Although I have to tell you, being in the 11th house, Mercury being in the 11th house, in the house of friends and society and people that you're connected with and organizations that you're connected with, sometimes this can mean that, and he has been going through this can mean that you're being attacked from all sides, right? Because Mercury can sometimes, you say something, it can be used against you. Because Mercury is speech, you're talking. It's ruling the second house of speech too, right? So it's a double whammy here with this Mercury. So he's talking, he's speaking, it's being used against him, and all of that is coming back at this time with the Jupiter-Mercury cycle that he's in. And also, I want to mention from a transits standpoint, Saturn has been in his 7th house, which, sometimes can indicate opponents. 7th house is people that you're one-on-one, you're connecting to. And during this Jupiter-Mercury time frame, Saturn was in Capricorn, some of that time frame too, and 6th house is conflicts and opponents, okay? Now, what is interesting is October 22nd, he's going to go into Jupiter-Ketu cycle. This is going to be a tough cycle for him because Ketu is in the 4th house with a debilitated moon, and it can show a loss, right? There can be a loss during this time frame. And also Jupiter being in the second house is considered a Maraka planet. Mercury rules the second house. Again, there's a Maraka tendency there. So the Jupiter Ketu cycle is going to be tough for him. It's not too long though. It's less than a year, October 22nd, 2023 till September 27th, 2024. So this particular cycle here is something to watch out for, because even though, and remember the Jupiter Mercury being 10 placements away, it has been taking him up to heights, right? No matter how many attacks were being thrown, his going up in poles, right? Because remember, 10th house is your public image. It's what people think of you. So that has been good in the Jupiter Mercury, but the Jupiter Ketu from October 22nd, it's going to bring some problems. So this dasha of Jupiter Ketu is definitely going to be tough for him. Now, even though the dasha is for like almost 11 months, out of this time frame, when the nodes move, I've been talking about the nodal move, right? Rahu is going to move from here into Pisces. Rahu is right now here in Aries. It's going to move into Pisces. And Ketu is here in Libra. It's going to move into Virgo. So remember, the nodal move is happening as well, the nodal change. That's happening the end of November. Now, this particular nodal change is also not that favorable for him, because Rahu will be moving into the 8th house of disgrace and humiliation. And it can be that a lot of things about him is coming out. But 8th house is also considered problems and endings. And Ketu will be moving into his 2nd house in the end of November. Now, once Ketu moves into Virgo in the month of January, it's going to be exactly on his Jupiter. So this Jupiter retrograde in his 2nd house, it's ruling the 8th house. So that's again problems, endings, death, transformation, all of that. And Ketu, which is the moksha planet, goes over that Jupiter in January. So this is a very humbling experience for him. Something's going to happen between November of this year and January of next year, which will it'll be a wake-up call for him. This is, I would say, the toughest 3 months for him in this cycle. So, and another thing also is, once Jupiter and Uranus start coming together here in Aries around 24 degrees of Aries, it'll be quincunx his Jupiter 24 degrees here. So that Jupiter is under a lot of stress as well with all of this happening. So there's definitely something that's coming up between November and January, which can be very tough for him. It could be that he's imprisoned, or it's a very humbling experience. And it's going to be, and it's all 8th house matters, which can be difficulties, endings, death. He's able to survive this particular time frame. Then when he goes into this Jupiter-Venus cycle, and remember, during the election next year, he will be in Jupiter-Venus if he is able to get through this tough time. Then that's September 2024, when he goes into Jupiter-Venus, that could be a much better cycle for him, because Venus rules the 10th house of career in his chart and career growth. And Jupiter and Venus are 11 placements away. Although Venus is sitting with Saturn here in the 12th house, again, like I said, 12th house does signify foreign relations and people who are in positions of power. But when he goes into the Jupiter-Venus cycle, it'll be a much favorable one for him. And during the election time, that's where he will be. Now, another thing also is, in May of next year, May 2024, once Jupiter moves from Aries into Taurus, it's going to be in his 10th house, and that's always career growth. And it will trine his natal Jupiter in the 2nd house. So it's kind of giving a relief from that Ketu sitting on it and all the other aspects that are kind of stressful. That Jupiter is going to give some relief in May of next year. So then he will start rising again. And once Jupiter goes on his Sun and Rahu combination here in the 10th house, that is, he's unstoppable at that point. That's a very good transit. So during the election time frame next year, November time frame of 2024, the transits and the dashas are looking very good for him, because Jupiter will be here in the 10th house of career. It'll be going over his Sun and Rahu, and it'll be trining his natal Jupiter. And also he will be in a good dasha, Jupiter-Venus cycle. That's also good. Although in order to get there, this Jupiter-Ketu cycle is going to be tough for him. And he has to kind of get through this, right? Especially, like I said, between November of this year and January of next year, this particular 3 months is going to be the most difficult, especially when Ketu starts going over this Jupiter here. And also Ketu's 5th aspect will be aspecting his planets here as well. So there is some difficulty coming up for him. And, it's going to be a wake-up call. It's going to be 8th house related. It's going to be a disgrace and humiliation related. And he needs to be careful in this time frame. Okay. But like I said, if this is over and he's fine and he's able to make it through, then I think the Jupiter-Venus will be a good time frame. And during the election next year, that puts him in a very powerful position with the transits at that time. So that is my take on Donald Trump's chart for this particular year and coming up year, and for the election. But it does look like there are some rough patches in this time frame that he has to get through before he can get to the point where he is successful, because all the growth that he's had this year in the Jupiter-Mercury cycle, even though he was being constantly attacked, right? Because Jupiter rules the 8th house, Mercury is sitting in Gemini in the 11th house. So there was constant attacks happening. But even then, his poles were rising. That's because he was in Jupiter Mercury, and they are 10 placements away, and that's growth and career growth. But at the same time, the Jupiter Ketu is going to be tough. And like I said, not only that, we have the nodes transiting as well, and the Ketu will be exactly on his natal Jupiter. So that's that cycle that I said between November and January of next year. Something unexpected is going to happen, which is going to turn this whole thing around. And that's a down kind of, remember the Kala Sarpa Yoga, that's going to be a low for him. And once he survives it, if he survives it, I think the next high will be even higher than ever before. So it's very possible that by the election time next year, the transits will really be favorable for him. So I'll come back to you next time with the next person that you requested for, which is Vivek Ramaswamy. And we'll look at his chart, and he has a fascinating chart. So we're going to look at his chart and see what's going on. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And thank you for listening, and thank you for subscribing.